So today we're going to talk about double stops, triple stops, and quadruple stops. So those are when you play more than one note at the same time on your violin. So I'm going to go one by one. So double stop, triple stop, and quadruple stop. Explain to you what those are and how you can play it on your violin. So let's start with double stops. The double stops are when you play two notes at the same time. So on the violin or any stringed instrument, that means you're playing two strings at the same time. So for example, something like this. Something like that. So how we make that happen? So let's talk about, I like to think of it as, or think of technique as more from like a physics standpoint, because violin is not magic, right? There's a mechanism to how we make it sound. So how do we play two strings at the same time? So let's talk about how we make sound on the violin. So we make sound by putting the bow in the contact with a string. So when you are putting the bow on one string and make contact with just one string, you get a single sound. If you make contact with two strings at the same time, you get a double stop, right? So how we do that, so let's talk about how we do that. So on the violin, if you were to play a G string, versus E string, what changed? How did you make the G string sound versus E string sound? So the way you do it is by changing the angle of the bow. More specifically, changing the angle between your elbow and your side. So for example, in G string, it was farther. And you go to E string by dropping the elbow and making this angle smaller. Like so. So let's apply the same logic or same physics to playing the double stops. So when you're playing a single string, my elbow is on the A string level. Whereas if I'm playing E string, my elbow is on the E string level. So that means if we change the angle of the elbow to touch both strings at the same time by putting the bow in the middle, you'll get a double stop. So on your violin, the easiest way to think about this is think about imagine there's an invisible string in between the two strings. So in this case, A and E string. Imagine there's an invisible string between your A string and E string, and put your bow on that invisible string. And you can actually see it. Make sure the bow is touching both strings at the same time and play. So A string elbow, E string elbow. Now we're going to imagine the invisible string, and we're going to find the level of the elbow that puts your bow on that invisible string between A and E string, and play. And that's how you get your double stops. So so that's the basics of how we can play two strings at the same time and not make it sound, a lot of times you've heard this, or you're starting to make it sound, but not really. So make sure your elbow level is on that invisible string between the two strings that you're trying to play. Like so. Okay. So now triple stop, and before I go into triple stop and quadruple stop, I like to mention that triple stop and quadruple stops are usually referred to as chords. So whenever you hear the word chords, that means anything that's more than double stops. So anytime you're playing three notes at the same time or four notes at the same time, we call that chords instead of saying triple stop, quadruple stop, which could be quite mouthful. But for today's purposes, I'm going to break it down into triple stop and quadruple stop, so we can kind of go into more specifics in those categories. So triple stop is when you're playing three notes at the same time. On the violin, generally speaking, when you see a triple stop, it will be played broken. So meaning, do you hear how I'm playing and then it's broken in the middle instead of all three notes at the same time? So now you can play it either way depending on the context of the music, and that's up to the musician to decide which way you would like to play the triple stops. But generally speaking, more often than not, it will be played brokenly, so two double stops. But there are occasions where you would want to play all three notes at the same time, and I would go into when you would want to do that and what effects that creates as well. So let's talk about how we play brokenly, or like so, when we play our triple stops. So the way you do it is you're breaking triple stop into two double stops. So the bottom and middle notes together, and middle and high notes together. So two double stops. So in case of this, let's say we're trying to play this triple stops. I'm playing the bottom and middle note, and the middle and the top note. And I'm gonna play as a double stop, go to the next double stop, like so. So the same principle applies when you're playing a triple stop. So when we play double stop, we want to find the elbow level for that invisible middle string, right? So when you're playing the triple stop, it's the same idea. You want to find the elbow level for that invisible string, but instead of finding just one invisible string, you want to find two invisible strings. So in this case, invisible string between your D and A string. I'm going to put my bow right there and play. And find another elbow level for A and E. And we're going to do that in one bow. Now I'm going to add my fingers. Like so. Now, when you're playing all three at the same time, essentially, your two string is the same idea as double stops. Essentially, your two string becomes D and E instead of D and A. And your middle string essentially is your invisible middle string. So in this case, I'm putting my bow on A string, apply a little bit more weight to get all the other two strings, the outer strings, and play. Now, because it requires more weight to really touch all three strings at the same time, your bow needs to be quicker. So that creates this sort of a more louder, more powerful, abrupt, and short. This effect. Now, I like to think of it as more abrupt. It sounds more abrupt. So when you need that, or you want that abrupt effect in your music, you would play all three at the same time instead of breaking it down, which creates a more rounder, a little bit more ringing quality as opposed to that. This is louder and more abrupt. This is more round. To sum it up, so triple stop is when you play three notes at the same time on your violin. You can play two different ways. One is as two double stops, so break the chord in the middle. Or all three at the same time. By touching all three strings at the same time with your bow. And the broken ones, or the two double stops, creates more rounder sound. And when you play all three at the same time, it's a little louder, and it's a little bit more abrupt, and a little bit more, there's a little bit more sharpness to it. Okay, so next is quadruple stops. So as the name suggests, quadruple stop, we're playing 4 notes at the same time. So how you do that is generally you break it down to 2 double stops. So the bottom 2 notes and the top 2 notes. So on your violin, most of the times when you encounter quadruple stops, it'll be 4 strings. There are occasions where it's not 4 strings, but just 4 notes at the same time. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to stick with the occasion where you play 4 strings at the same time. So you're going to break it into 2 different double stops. So bottom 2 notes and top 2 notes. G and D string and A string. Same as triple stop. We're going to break into 2 and do it all in one bow, like so. And how do we get to the top 2 notes? By changing the angle between your elbow and your side. And connect. It's important to remember, we always have to change the angle of your elbow, the angle between your elbow and the side to get to the next double stop. Otherwise, this would happen. Ugh. I call that a choking sound. That's because we are not changing the angle and we're just forcing it upon it, and it's too much weight. So if we want to get the ringing and beautiful quadruple stops, then we have to think of it as 2 double stops and make sure you're changing the angle of the bow to get to your next double stop. So 2 and 2. Like so. So today we covered double stops, triple stops, and quadruple stops. And triple stops and quadruple stops, also known as chords. Oftentimes we call that chords instead of saying triple stop, quadruple stop, which is could be quite mouthful. So we learned how to play double stop by changing the angle of the bow, or angle between your elbow and your side, and making sure your bow is touching both strings. And when you're playing triple stop, you can play 2 different ways. One is by breaking down to 2 double stops, so the bottom 2 notes and the top 2 notes. And the other way to do it is playing it all at once for a more abrupt, louder, and more sharper effect. And then quadruple stop, you're playing 4 notes at the same time. Most often, it'll be broken into 2 parts: the bottom 2 notes and the top 2 notes. And the same principle applies as you're playing a double stop and triple stop. You're making sure you're changing the angle of the bow to get to those 2 strings. So I'm going to play for you an example of chords and double stops, and let me know if you can hear or if you can see how I'm making those happen. So that's it for today. Let me know what other technique or other topics that you want me to cover in our weekly live on Thursday. I go live every Thursday, and be sure to join us next time, and I'll see you next time.